Hi, I'm Admiral, and in this video I'm finally getting back to good old Pokémon gameplay. Today I'm taking a crack at Pokémon Ultra Sun, doing my first completely normal playthrough. I don't have the best idea of what my team will end up being, but I do have a few Pokémon in mind. I'm also expecting this to be a much smoother ride than our playthrough with just a Kommo-o, considering the pretty poor defensive combination of Dragon and Fighting. With a whole team to work with, I think most of those old roadblocks won't be nearly as troublesome for us in this playthrough. Even though I haven't mentioned it in a good while, you should probably know that I write these scripts as I play, so you're basically getting my moment-to-moment commentary with a bit of hindsight and self-editing sprinkled in where it counts. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. This game starts as all Pokemon games do. I make my character, and then pick a starter. I grab Litten because I always take the fire starter on first playthroughs, and pretty much every time I play a Pokemon game, unless I want to mix it up. We'll eventually have an Incineroar, and while I'm sure that every competitive player's chest probably tightened a little bit hearing that, we will have a phenomenal Pokemon with us, even though we won't have the truly competitive build that makes Incineroar so strong normally. Anywho, after I grab Litten, I make my way to Iki Town, where I battle Hau for the first time. I keep accidentally calling him Hop, so if I don't catch it during the video and call him Hop, know that I very obviously mean Hau. Regardless of his name, I beat him easily since he always takes the starter that's disadvantaged against the player, so after meeting Lily, Nebby, and Kahuna Hala, Kukui sends me home for the evening. The next day, Kukui teaches me to catch Pokemon, so I grab a Grubbin and a Pick-a-Peck. From there, I head to Iki Town again, where I battle Hau again, and win again. After being sent home once more on the Black Screen Express, I again find myself dragged away from home, this time by Lily the following evening. She takes me to the professor's lab, where I receive the Rotom Dex, catch a Wingull, and can finally start the game proper. Kind of. They throw a ton of new mechanics and tutorials at you here, so I'm gonna skip most of this stuff. This section is actually what made me drop Sun when I played it on release as a teen. I felt like I had played an hour of tutorials and new feature showcases instead of a Pokemon game. Now that I finally have a bit of space to breathe for a moment, let's take stock of the team and our goals. The only new addition to the team is a Pichu, who I meant to grab earlier for Alolan Raichu, but totally forgot about until the trainer school teacher confronted me with a Poplio and I had no answer. Otherwise, it was smooth sailing to a Lima's trial, the first one of the playthrough and our current objective. I'm not super worried since we'll have Workup and Brick Break to deal with the normal types here, but these will only get harder as the game progresses. As a side note, if you're not familiar with Gen 7, they replace gyms with island trials and gym leaders with trial captains. It's different, but not bad different or good different. Just different. I battled the Totem Gumshoes with Litten leading us off. The first few turns see Gumshoes and its little assistant lowering Litten's stats, in exchange for a solid chunk of damage on Gumshoes in return. A held Oranberry keeps Litten healthy as they plug away at him, but I have to take him out after he takes Gumshoes down. Thankfully, Pick-a-Peck is able to come in, tank a nasty tackle, and retaliate with a Rock Smash for the win. After that, I do some story stuff with Nebby before returning to Iki Town for the Kahuna fight. Hala is a fighting type specialist, but with a sharp beak on our newly minted Trumbeak, alongside potential burns from our less new but still impressive Torracat, I'm not particularly worried. Hala leads with Machop, and I send out Torracat. I open with Z Workup, getting our attack to +2 to start. Machop sets up with Focus Energy, so we get a ton of damage off on the next turn with Fire Fang. We miss out on the KO, which lets Machop answer with a nasty Revenge. I predict a heal from Hala, so I go for Double Kick to exploit the free turn and get some chip damage off without risking a miss from Fire Fang. Being right lets me finish Machop on the next turn with another Double Kick. Hala brings out Makuhita next. I expect a Fake Out, but with no immunity or access to protect, I just have to accept the hit. Luckily, that looks like it gets me into Blaze range, but Makuhita's Thick Fat keeps me from the one-shot. That's really annoying, because Hala just starts going for Sand Attack as Torracat whiffs Double Kick. On the third turn, we whiff again, but this time Makuhita goes for Arm Thrust, taking us down to just 4 HP. We're finally able to answer with an attack of our own, connecting with Double Kick one last time to take Makuhita down. Hala's cheap strategy continues to fail him as Crabrawler comes out, It takes a nasty stab, blaze-boosted Fire Fang that somehow doesn't one-shot, but that's actually okay. It gets Hala to burn his Z-move, taking down Torracat's last few points of HP, and since we probably weren't going to get lucky and connect on a third hit in a row, I'll take what I can get. That lets me bring in Trumbeak and finish the battle with a peck, ending our adventures on Melee for now. Our adventure will see us hanging out on Akala Island for a while, where I meet and battle Galadion for the first time. Fortunately, right now, his legendary type Null isn't much of a threat, so it's a pretty easy fight. I also do the Water Trial, where our 2 flying types and newly evolved Pikachu are more than a match for the opposition. Since I can't stick around and catch a Dewpider yet, since it's nighttime in-game, I just leave for the next trial. This is probably as good a point as any to remind you to subscribe, if you haven't already. And if you are, you should definitely check to make sure notifications are on too. Studies have shown that subscribing can have similar effects on your height to major surgery, so if you ever want to break into 6 feet without breaking your knees, this may just help you out. Anyway, after going back and catching a Dewpider and training it until it evolves, we're just about ready for the fire trial. It's a bit annoying, being a quiz that forces you to fight even when you're right. One of my least favorite things is when games punish you for doing well. But the bit with the hiker is funny enough to buy a lot of goodwill back, for me anyway. Despite really good flinch luck on Bite getting us into the totem fight with full team HP, the luck swings entirely in the opposite direction as soon as we start. So despite our strong counters to Alolan Marowak, we still barely scrape by. It's early enough into the run that I know we'll be fine once we have more evolutions and better team members, but I'm still feeling a bit of trepidation for later into the game. Luckily, we have Viridium Z, and the next trial focuses on grass types, so we'll at least be okay for the rest of Akala. I hope. But first, it's time for me to do something that I think is deeply funny. You see, I was browsing Twitter while slacking off, and saw a tweet pointing out that players could, theoretically, catch a Salamence on the first island if Bagon calls Salamence for help. You want to guess what I went back and did? To break it down for you, Bagon is a 1% encounter rate. On top of that, it's not guaranteed that it'll call a Salamance's backup. In fact, my first Bagon called a second Bagon, which is when I realized how important Adrenaline Orbs would be to this quest of mine. Normally, an SOS battle will only result in one ally called per battle, but Adrenaline Orbs let that happen as many times as the player wants, so I can theoretically re-roll Bagon's partner as many times as I need, or until I run out of orbs. This is made slightly harder by the fact that all of the potential encounters on this route share a level range from 9 to 12, so I can't fudge the probability with Repel like you can with some other rare encounters. And to make matters worse, Bagon very rarely calls for help, even with an Adrenaline Orb. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, Bagon isn't the only one here with a 1% spawn chance, because if Bagon calls for help, which it doesn't always do, and even if a Pokemon comes to help, which doesn't always happen, there is still only a 1% chance of that Pokemon being a Salamence. In fact, the only reason I'm telling you any of this is to explain the Bagon that is now in my party, because after over 2 hours of grinding and a 30-minute long Bagon chain, the best I could do is the adamant-natured Bagon you see before you now. In other words, I did all of that to not have a pseudo-legendary. And knowing me, I probably did it all wrong anyway. After sitting through another hellishly long tutorial about a feature nobody cares about anymore, I finally get to the grass trial. Just like Kiawe's, this one also subjects you to a mini-gauntlet with no healing before tossing a totem at you. Unlike Kiawe's, though, this totem likes to waste your time by just healing the whole time with Synthesis, made worse by its ally Comfey also healing it and giving it defense boosts. Do you guys see why I tend to call Gen 7 a chore to play? Because it is. These fights can get tedious very quickly, but I do still really like Gen 7. Complaining aside, I end up resetting a couple of times, but on my third go, Lurantis calls for Kecleon instead of Comfey. That leaves me free to set up with Workup and then hit it with Inferno Overdrive after Kecleon does me the favor of setting up the Sun. At +2 attack, with Sun Boost, Stab, and potentially a Blaze Boost on Torracat, Lurantis is very easily dispatched. Torracat then smacks Kecleon hard with a bite, but Trumbeak ends up getting the kill with Brick Break after Dizzy Punch finishes poor Torracat off. The strategy was always to implant a fighting weakness onto Kecleon by abusing its ability so Torracat could hit Double Kick, but this works just as well. From there, Kukui invites me to join him at the Dimensional Research Lab, and after learning about the incredible research taking place there, the Eye of Sauron blinks at me. I should be going to the Grand Island trial to take on Olivia and her rock types, but I decide that my team needs some levels. I swap a Wingull out for a Diglett since its ground steel typing gives it a lot of offensive and defensive power, and then get to work on leveling. Once I've finished that, I set off to find Olivia. Trumbeak evolved into Toucannon, and Diglett evolved into an ABBA cover band during the grind, but I sadly didn't record it, so I don't have any footage of that. Sorry. Anyway, on my way through Memorial Hill, where I am once again confronted by people who think that a cemetery is an appropriate place for battling, looking at you, Pokemon Tower and Mount Pyre trainers, I'm once again confronted by the startling number of adults in the Pokemon world that feel comfortable using a child as a human shield and/or soldier. And, to make things even more offensive, they don't even have the courtesy to heal my team after. That aside, I'm ready for Olivia, so I get started on that. My team has a pretty glaring weakness to Rock at the moment, with Toucannon, Araquanid, and Torracat all struggling against the type, and with pretty lackluster moves to counter it at the moment too. Thankfully, I at least have the Brick Break TM to help out, plus Dugtrio's ground moves, but it's still not great. Anorith goes down to a single Bubble Beam from Araquanid, but if we're already getting outsped, it doesn't look too good. Lily puts up a pretty good fight too, given its natural bulk, so Dugtrio's in pretty shoddy shape by the time that Lycanroc comes out. I stay in, hoping Olivia will burn her Z-move like Hala did, or that I can maybe outspeed and get a Bulldoze off, but I get no such luck. I bring in Pikachu next, hoping again to outspeed so I can hit Thunder Wave, or to at least proc Static if I don't, but once again, no such luck. Olivia does burn her Z-move here, one-shotting Pikachu in the process, and that gives us a fighting chance. I bring in Araquanid, again hoping to outspeed, while knowing that I won't, so I'm down to 3 team members after I'm proven right. Torracat and Trumbeak go down too, so I'm ready to reset and run it back, but Bagon is actually able to clutch up, finishing it off with Chekhov's Brick Break, letting us limp over the finish line and claim victory. Now that the big fight is out of the way, remember that dude who used me as a human shield earlier? Well, despite 95% of what he was saying being totally bogus, he did invite me to check out Ether Paradise. And to me, it is paradise. Beautiful woman aside, I do have to fight a Nihilego here, but its quad ground weakness and its poison stab make Dugtrio more than well equipped to handle it. From there, it's off to Ula Ula Island. Lily and I meet Acerola, one of my favorite Alola characters, and then I fight off Team Skull yet again. They're trying to steal a bus stop, for some reason, but Torracat makes short work of them. That gets Bagon to evolve into Shelgon, and then it's off to the Electric Trial against Totem Togedemaru. Dugtrio should be able to handle this one too, but it could get dicey if I play it wrong, despite Togedemaru's quad weakness to ground. Despite me just talking about Dugtrio being good for this one, I actually lead with Torracat. Torracat targets Togedemaru's primary steel typing and gives us a strong answer into Skarmory, if that's the first ally Togedemaru calls. Amazingly, my plan works pretty perfectly. I have Torracat work up on the first turn, as Togedemaru just uses Spiky Shield. Sure enough, Skarmory is the ally called, so we bring it down to Sturdy off of Inferno Overdrive. Skarmory sets up Tailwind, but it doesn't do much since Togedemaru likes to use Spiky Shield every other turn, and so never takes advantage of the speed boost. That, combined with Dugtrio's invulnerability to most of their offensive moves, lets us win pretty handily. After that, I track down Kukui and fight Guzma for the first time. He goes down without too much issue, netting Torracat his final evolution into Incineroar along with the Incinium Z from Kukui. On top of that, we learn Darkest Lariat, which will be fantastic into our next trial, the Ghost Trial. It'll only do neutral damage into Totem Mimikyu, but it also ignores Mimikyu's Omni Boost, so we take what we can get. Plus, our primary fire typing works well with our secondary dark typing, so Mimikyu can only do neutral damage to us. My strategy is to lead with Raichu. A secondary psychic type makes us pretty vulnerable, but I hope to outspeed and slap Mimikyu with Nuzzle, which guarantees paralysis and therefore a speed advantage. But instead we get outsped and one-shot by Shadow Claw. Not a problem, as Dugtrio's Bulldoze can get us a couple of speed drops as Banette comes in. But we only survive long enough to get one. Not great, but I can at least bring Incineroar in now for some solid damage. But he also only survives long enough to hit once. even worse. Ultimately, Toucanon comes in to clutch up the win, which wasn't my plan, but works well enough for me. I think that if I had the chance to do that over, I'd have taken Eviolite off Shelgon, kept Raichu as Pikachu and given it the Eviolite, and gone for Nuzzle after hopefully surviving a hit. Barring that, we could at least try to proc Static. Everything worked out, but it didn't feel great in the moment. Either way, after a quick stop at the Pokemon Center, I double back to catch what will likely be our final team member, Mimikyu. I have a practice of trying to only use regional Pokemon on my first casual playthrough of a game, so I kind of knew that Shelgon wouldn't be sticking with us until the end, but I enjoyed having him while he was here. When I get back to Ether House, Team Skull has just robbed a child, and they challenge me personally to a Po-Town showdown. While I don't intend to play Gen 7 often, I will be making that joke every time I do. It goes pretty well, as Guzma and I trade devastating blows before I come out the victor. I'm starting to recognize that a Lowland Dugtrio kind of sucks. Pretty much any time I send him out, he just gets outsped in one shot, so I may need to look into a replacement sometime soon. I'm not sure who I can find that fits the bill, but I'll figure it out. The poor guy is just stuck in the unfortunate position of being held back by his Cantonian form's bad stats. In the meantime, let's get back to the action. While I was off beating up Guzma, Team Skull went back for Lily, since the most capable trainers around her were distracted. And credit where it's due, that's actually a really impressive play for a group that prides itself on being, well, not very impressive. Gladion makes me fight him for no real reason, and then Nanu makes me fight him because he's the kahuna, which makes sense enough for me. We rush off to Ether Paradise to rescue our pal, which, after some story stuff, essentially prompts Lusamine to fuck off into the void. Tragic loss of a MILF, but such is life. Don't get me wrong, she's insane and violent, but what can I say? She's hot. From here, it's just more story stuff. Lily and I hunt down a flute, Hapu becomes a kahuna. Have I mentioned her yet? And I explore Pony Canyon, culminating in an island trial with no captain. Totem Komao, sadly, can't be completely walled by Mimikyu, who's our best matchup into it. That's especially true considering its Omni Boost, meaning that it outspeeds most of our team from the jump. And so, I decided to do what any reasonable person would do to prepare. I completely stopped playing. I don't know if it was my burgeoning addiction to Star Rail, my increased interest in streaming, or some other third thing, but I totally dropped Ultra Sun. There probably already are, and will certainly be more stream VODs on this channel where I mention how much I've been putting off playing any deeper, but I finally got back to it after, let me just check here, 2 entire months from August 21st to October 22nd. Yikes. So, to compensate, I did what any reasonable person would do to prepare after not touching the game for 2 months. I cheated. Grinding is a pain, so I just put my team on some reasonably priced steroids because I really just wanted to have this video out, and you all totally understand and won't cook me for it in the comments, right? Guys? The battle itself actually goes pretty smoothly. Since I finally have a decent level lead over a totem Pokemon, I'm finally able to lead with Raichu to outspeed and get Nuzzle off before getting taken down. In fact, not only do we survive the turn, we're also able to hit the ally Noivern with a Nuzzle too, so we're in a fantastic spot as Mimikyu comes in. We miss our first play rough, which is annoying but not a fight ender by any stretch of the imagination. We connect 2 times right after, and it only took 2 because of a held berry, to take down Komao, and then 1 final hit for Noivern, and we've won. From there, we do the ceremony with Lily at the Altar of Sun, Necrozma takes Nebby over like a symbiote, Hala says the thing, and then I hop aboard the Lunala that the Ultra Recon Squad just had sitting around, I guess. Like, they had a box legendary, a restricted Pokemon even, whose secondary ghost typing counters Necrozma's psychic typing, available the whole time, and still chose to wait until after Necrozma left with the Lola's Light to bring it out. I don't know why that didn't hit me as hard when I played this game the first time. Or maybe it did. Frankly, I don't really remember. But that is an insane thing to not only include in the story, but then also skip over the way they did. The characters talk a great deal about how miserable living with Necrozma is, but their egregious misuse of resources has me thinking that maybe they deserve it. That rant gave me a headache. Anyway, our next battle is with Ultra Necrozma. or perhaps more accurately, a double Omni-boosted legendary who will surely one-shot my entire team if I don't use more steroids expeditiously. Would you like to guess my strategy for this fight? It took a few attempts, but I eventually lucked out with the damage rolls to get a very low bloodshed run on this guy that only took some light steroid use, which is always nice. That lets us return the light to Alola once more and continue on our island challenge. Before I leave, though, the Ultra Recon Squad members in this dimension offer me a Poipole, who I immediately swap in for Dugtrio. Sorry, bud, you're just kinda bad. And so, with Baby Ultra Beast in party, we move on. My next stop is Mina's challenge, which just turns into a rematch boss rush against a few of the trial captains, which is nothing spectacular. From there, it's one last Totem Pokemon, Totem Rabombi, a double Omni-boosted bug fairy type. So, to prepare, I do what any reasonable person would do. More steroids! No, I'm kidding. I just swap out Incineroar's Incendium Z for Firium Z, take Rabombi to a quarter with Inferno Overdrive on the first turn, finish it with Flare Blitz on the second turn, and one-shot its assistant Blissey with Brick Break to close it out. Light work, mainly thanks to all of that earlier cheating. Our final challenge before the Elite Four is the battle against Hapu, now a kahuna in her own right. Luckily, Araquanid makes short work of her team. Golurk and Flagon go down to a single liquidation apiece, and I hit the bulkier Mudsdale with the Z move to one-shot it as well. Her final Pokemon is Gastrodon, so I bring in Toucannon to handle it, letting us move on. Although, we don't get very far, as I was actually wrong about Hapu being our last pre-E4 challenge. Instead, that honor actually goes to Gladion, who waits for us at the foot of Mount Lanakila. Luckily, it's still pretty easy as our team is pretty high level, a necessary part of beating Ultra Necrozma, at least if you're me, so we come out on top. Speaking of Ultra Necrozma, I snag regular Necrozma from Victory Road and then stop off at Mahalo Trail for Solgaleo. I fuse the two, and then go on a 15-minute long scavenger hunt for a heart scale so I can finally evolve Poipole by teaching it Dragon Pulse. Some love and steroids later, and we have an Ultra Beast to pair alongside our legendary, and we are ready for the end of the game. Before we start, here's a quick look at the team. Honestly, some better TMs would be nice, but I remember from my Kommo playthrough that a lot of the good stuff is locked behind the postgame, so I'm not going to stress too much about our move selection. I think we've got a really solid mix of physical and special moves alongside decent type coverage, so we should be okay, even though our team's natures are, frankly, really quite shit. I'm also a bit worried about the hole Araquanid leaves behind, as water is generally a very good type, at least in my opinion. We're making up for that hole with a ton of firepower from Necrozma and Naganadel, so it should be okay, but I'm still going to worry because that's just who I am. We'll see how things go, I guess. I decide that my first opponent will be Molayne and his steel types. He leads with Klefki, and I bring in Incineroar. Klefki moves first to set up a Reflect, so our Flare Blitz doesn't get the one-shot. I start spamming Brick Break as Molayne heals, so Prankster ensures that we're sitting atop 2 layers of spikes before Klefki goes down. Metagross comes out next, certainly one of the scariest Pokemon in the entire Elite Four, so I have Incen use Malicious Moonsault to one-shot it and prevent any issues. Next up is Dugtrio, who outspeeds to nail us with a nasty Earthquake. We retaliate with a Brick Break to one-shot, and then stare down Magnezone. We're not able to one-shot thanks to Sturdy, so I opt for Brick Break to get us some damage, and we finally go down to Thunderbolt. I bring in Toucannon to finish things up with its own Brick Break. This is a bit risky given Toucannon's electric weakness, but I trust in the plan, and it works. Last is Molayne's Bisharp, but a quad weakness to fighting ensures that we one-shot to win the battle. Between fights, I realized that I completely forgot to stock up on revives and general healing items, so the Elite Four gauntlet just got a bit scarier. But I am determined to see it through, which takes us to our next opponent, Kahili and her flying team. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think she shows up in the game at all before this point, making her unique among the Elite Four. I certainly don't remember her being anywhere else, but I could also have just missed her somewhere in the overworld. It's a bit of a shame since I actually like her design. I just wish that there was an actual character attached, you know? Anyway, she leads with Braviary and I lead with Raichu. As you'd expect, this fight is really a non-issue. Discharges sweep her team easily. I'd actually wanted to set up a nasty plot to guarantee the sweep, but every time I tried, Braviary would lower our speed with Mean Look, and then Raichu would get absolutely cooked, so I just gave up and went purely on the offensive. Next, I decide to challenge Olivia, and decide to switch to Necrozma as a lead to counter her lead on Armaldo. I open with Sunsteel Strike, but not before taking a decent chunk of damage from Armaldo's X-Scissor. I switch to Incineroar as Probopass comes in, hitting a quad-effective Brick Break. We leave P-Pass with a Sliver, so we take a good bit of damage from Power Gem in retaliation. We finish the Mustachioed Mon off with another Brick Break, and stay in as Gigalith comes out. In hindsight, I should have brought in Raichu for Grass Knot, but oh well. Anyway, we do decent damage with Brick Break, but then nearly get KO'd by a Stone Edge, so I switch over to Necrozma again to avoid damage from the weather and to finish it with Sunsteel Strike. We take damage from Bulldoze on the switch, knocking our speed down, but it doesn't end up mattering as we outspeed on the next turn to take Gigalith down. Lycanroc comes out next, so I keep Necrozma in. We take a bit of damage from Crunch, but then one-shot with Sunsteel Strike. We outspeed her final Pokemon, Cradily, to do the same thing, and win the battle. Last up is Acerola, whose ghost types should be pretty easy to handle. I lead with Incineroar, and she leads with Banette. I have Incineroar set up with a workup, and Banette hits us with Screech. After that, I outspeed and one-shot Banette, Palossand, and Delmise with Darkest Lariat. Frostlass actually outspeeds and uses Confuse Ray, but we break through to, again, one-shot with Darkest Lariat. Drifblim is last, and I don't think I have to tell you what happens next. But I will show you! And with that, we're off to the champion. Our old pal Hal leads with a Raichu of his own, so I bring in Incineroar. We hit hard with Darkest Lariat, hard enough to one-shot even, but not before getting hit hard by Focus Blast. It feels wrong to say that Focus Blast connected, but that's what happened, amazingly. Anyway, Vaporeon comes out next, so I bring in Raichu. We hit it with Discharge, but amazingly don't one-shot, so we get hit by Charm, lowering our physical attack. But that doesn't matter at all. Hal heals on the next turn as we use Discharge again, and on the next turn, we finish Vaporeon off. You guys are going to be normal about this part of the fight, right? Next up is Tauros, so I leave Raichu in to Intimidate. We hit decently hard with Psychic before taking a massive Earthquake for a very obvious one-shot, so I bring Toucannon in next. We take another massive hit from Double Edge, and then finish it with Brick Break. I stay in as Crabominable comes in, and go for Roost to drop our Ice weakness and get some health back. The plan works even better than I'd hoped for, as Crabominable just misses with Ice Hammer. On the next turn, I go for Beak Blast, hoping to burn it so we can be a bit safer if we need to heal again, but Crabominable whiffs Ice Hammer again, letting us one-shot it. Hal brings Decidueye out next, so I bring in Incineroar for a starter matchup. We outspeed and one-shot it with Malicious Moonsault, so I guess that's about as much screen time as Decidueye gets. Last is Noivern, so I bring in Naganadel, baby, here for its first ever fight. We get outsped and brought down to just 6 HP from Dragon Pulse, and then retaliate with a DP of our own to one-shot, winning the fight. I had no idea we wouldn't outspeed, but I honestly think that getting one-shot there would have been the funniest fucking thing possible. Anyway, we're the champions of Alola now. I'm not gonna lie, there was a good part of the mid-game where I wanted absolutely nothing to do with finishing this playthrough, but I'm glad I came back to it. Ultra Sun is great. It's just also very long and drags during the early to mid-game, at least for me. Luckily, it more than makes up for it in charm. Alola absolutely oozes with charm, from the new Pokemon designs to its delightful cast of characters. Plus, everyone calling me cousin all the time makes me feel like I'm in a much less stressful episode of The Bear, which is always nice. In other words, I like everything about Gen 7 except for actually playing it. And that's ultimately all I have to say about this one. Just a relaxing little playthrough, with a very strange level progression thanks to my rather liberal use of rare candies. If you enjoyed watching this video, you should consider giving it a formal like so YouTube also knows that you enjoyed it. You may even want to consider subscribing to the channel so you can see even more videos just like this one. I'm also excited to mention that I'll be streaming Pokemon on Twitch again, so I hope you'll consider popping on over there, even if it's just to say hi. Now that I'm pretty much entirely caught up on Honkai Star Rail's story, my streaming will steadily get more diverse, which I think is a net positive for all of us. I'm not sure where I'll be in my other projects when this goes up, so I'll avoid talking about any of them here like I normally do. However, I'd be remiss not to mention that sometime soon I'll do a stream ranking every single Pokemon ever, based entirely on how much I like it. So consider this the formal announcement for that, with a date on screen now, if I've chosen one. I, again, have no idea when this will be going up, so it makes more sense to add that date here instead of in the narration, you know? And if you're wondering where I've been, do me a favor and check out the channel posts. You should get everything you need from there. Anyway, all of that aside, I'm going to wrap things up here. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.